Hey, how's it going?
The car could use another bumper stand.
So you don't like John Kasich? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I got feelings.
You have been involved with the Libertarian Party for a long time, and I wanted to just talk about ideas and you know what motivates you to run third party, because Libertarians don't win, do they?
Sometimes they do. I would find that their ideas are certainly winning and have been winning in the long run. It's always amazing to me that here's a political party that was created in 1971. I was born in 1983. And I think we're finally at the tipping point where all these ideas of the libertarians of personal freedom, economic freedom, are really becoming popular with my generation, the Millennial Generation. And so I see that the ideas are already winning. I remember running for Congress as a libertarian in 2010 in Ohio, in the now famous 12th district. That's just barely. I don't even think the election's over yet. They're still recounting votes. But I went around talking about how gay marriage should be legal. The government shouldn't be involved in marriage whatsoever. Sure enough, 5 years later, that's the law of the land. I remember talking about legal marijuana.
Do you think that was you?
That was all me.
Yeah.
I think that was all me. I mean, it was clearly a lot of people having the same logic, but it's impressive because it's like I went around. Republicans thought it was crazy because of their evangelical, leanings. And the Democrats thought it was crazy because, remember, they used to all be for civil unions.
Right.
And now it's just like, hey, now it's just legal. So that's always good for me to realize that we were kind of ahead of the curve. So, and I would say, again, that, outside of Ohio, because we've had ballot access troubles for the last 4 years, libertarians are winning. They're winning at local elections. They're winning in state elections now. You got Nebraska, New Hampshire, Tennessee, Texas, California, New Mexico. We got a statewide guy there. Gary Johnson now running in the Senate race as a libertarian. So I think libertarian ideas continue to grow, and as those ideas start to win, I think you're going to start to see candidates start to win. You
touched on this, but I think that libertarian values and libertarian ideas have very much penetrated the culture, and things like criminal justice reform and decriminalizing marijuana and getting the government out of the marriage business. These are just common sense libertarian ideas. But I think the L word is still sort of a mystery word.
Yes, there's still a lot of misnomers about it.
Yeah. So what's your elevator pitch for people watching this that have never heard of libertarians before? What's a libertarian?
Well, I remember when I ran in 2010, libertarianism was even less known. And our whole pitch then was fiscally conservative and socially liberal, to kind of paint the picture of, we're kind of with the Democrats on personal freedoms, and we're with the Republicans when it comes to fiscal responsibility. So that used to be the pitch. I'd say if you want to update it now, it's really just about personal freedoms and economic freedoms. Keep the government out of your bedroom, keep the government out of your pocketbook. I think those are kind of the basic ways to pitch it, because it's, for a lot of people, that's how they feel. It's kind of the best parts of the Democrats and the best parts of the Republicans when it comes to just respecting your tax dollars and also respecting your privacy.
So I always thought that I understand why guys like Gary Johnson used that characterization, and I don't think it's quite right, because the whole point of being a libertarian is that you don't want to tell people how to live their lives. So our philosophy says the government doesn't have an opinion about you being conservative or liberal. It just has an opinion about whether or not you're hurting anybody or taking their stuff.
Right. Yes.
So I feel like we might be leaving votes on the table if we're not allowing conservatives to be conservative in their personal lives and liberals to be liberal in their personal lives, and to vote libertarian, because maybe that's the only party that's not going to use the government to force you to live a certain way.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way to put it too. I think the old way was the best way to explain it to people who had never heard of the Libertarian Party ever,
yeah.
Right? And I know, down the line, that is also how I have to explain it to folks. Is essentially, don't hurt anybody, don't take anybody's stuff, and once that line is crossed, that's the only time when laws and government have to get involved. But there's so many hardcore libertarians, I think, go too far when trying to explain libertarianism to people. The whole idea of the gun to the head. I don't want the gun to the head to force me to do a, we started to get into analogies that I can't really explain to my parents.
Yeah.
I can't really explain to people when going door to door or county fairs. It really comes down to issues. It's like, hey, you're Republican, but so you like to save your tax dollars. Yes, absolutely. But you don't mind if people smoke weed, right? Oh, okay, great. Well, that's an area we can relate on. You don't mind if gay people get married. Well, there's another area we can agree on. You want to protect your Second Amendment rights? Great, we agree on that. You want more choices in healthcare. You don't want the government to have control over the healthcare industry and the health insurance industry. You think they're doing a bad job? Well, great, we agree on that. We want to open that up to the free market too. So for me, I always find talking about actual issues and policies translates better than going right into the whole libertarian philosophy ideology.
My joke about libertarians, which is not that funny because it's not really a joke, is that a real libertarian's not completely comfortable until they've chased every single person out of the room.
I would say that's fair. I would say that's, I find that very funny because I've seen it happen. That's the tough part about running for office as a libertarian is I'm already offending my liberal friends for being libertarian, but then I offend libertarians by not being libertarian enough. So I'm just hanging out by myself. Most of the time.
Just you and your mom, basically, or
not even my mom. I mean, she's going to vote for me because it's me, but I mean, I don't know how libertarian my mom is.
She's telling you she's going to vote for you, but she's really voting for the other guy.
Yeah, you know what? I'm fine with that. I respect her right to do what she wants to do.
But the challenge, and that's the dilemma for candidates, is I think there's an opportunity for libertarians, big L and small L, to really grow the tent and be attractive to this new generation. I call them liberty curious because they don't really know what it is yet, but they're checking us out because they're turned off by the tribal warfare coming out of the R's and the D's.
Right, yes. I remember we were on the Liberty Tour together in 2016, campaigning alongside of the Johnson Weld campaign, and we had Bernie supporters at our rallies because they were looking for something different, and they agreed with Gary on issues like foreign policy, civil liberties, protecting civil liberties, and ending the drug war, legalizing marijuana. There's plenty of big areas, and I've always felt this way too because I actually came to libertarianism from the left. I was a Democrat during the Bush-Cheney years because I wanted to end the wars, I wanted to protect civil liberties, I wanted to end the drug war, and I thought the Democrats represented those views. And then they got elected 2006, 2008, and they didn't do anything about all the reasons I supported them. And then that translates into the Ron Paul moment, May 2007, when he spoke up at the debate, and here's this anti-war, pro-civil liberties, anti-drug war Republican, and I'm like, oh, hey, hold on, what is this? It was all new territory for me. So that's the nice thing again about libertarians. They're able to have these ideas that can pull people from the left, pull people from the right. And I registered Republican to vote Ron Paul in 2008, the primary in Ohio. But 8 years later, I registered Democrat to vote for Bernie in the primary, in the Democrat primary. And all in between, I've always just kind of supported Gary Johnson.
Yeah, so you were a Ron Paul kid as well, right?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, there are plenty of millennials who I think resonated to Ron Paul's ideas.
So we're gonna get a beer. I don't know if you like beer, but I think you're un-American if you don't. To be honest with you,
a wise man once told me that beer is freedom.
I've heard that as well.
So I think I'll join you.
And I think it is wise.
We rolling?
We're rolling.
All right, John McAfee gave us these beers. What could go wrong?
Beer, delicious beer.
To your health, to your liberty. Hey, that's tasty. What do we got here?
So these guys, it's Aslan Brewing, and I feature this a lot on my show because I think they're one of the best young nano breweries in the country. And that's an Imperial Pilsner, and this is an India Pale Lager. And I just love what they're doing. The city of Herndon has screwed them every step of the way as they try to start a small business and they're trying to sell this delicious product to their consumers. That's why I use the metaphor beer is freedom, because if you don't understand sort of supply and demand and you've never read Mises, you get beer and you've been to one of these nano breweries and you think it's awesome that these young people can produce these awesome things. To me, that's freedom.
We should let them do it. I remember in Ohio we had big roadblocks for microbreweries and also micro distilleries. And when those went away, they started popping up everywhere. There's still a lot more work to do though. There's a lot of alcohols in Ohio that are regulated and not allowed. Yingling from Pennsylvania, we just approved that being sold in the state a few years ago.
Really?
Because of some old grudge. So, yeah, I agree with you absolutely. Beer is freedom. It's the perfect representation of everything that's wrong with government and everything that's right with people.
So what was the moment that you decided you were a libertarian?
I remember I turned 18 in August 2001, and 1 month later the world was a very different place. Different from any other time in human history. And I saw the Republican Party start a war, start encroaching on civil liberties. They were already spending a lot of money, giving a tax cut of $5 trillion to rich people, and then spending $5 trillion on the war that they started. And I remember thinking I was a Democrat. My parents were Democrat. I had an independent streak already. I voted for Ross Perot in the '92 mock presidential election in 3rd grade. I was the only one. And I was shocked when he didn't win because I didn't understand how third-party politics worked yet. But I thought I was a Democrat. And during the Bush-Cheney years, I campaigned for Kerry. I kept, thinking the Democrats will end this war, the Democrats will restore civil liberties. There were other issues I cared about, like, legalizing marijuana seemed like a no-brainer to me. Criminal justice reform. I remember, in college, I was part of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which has a very simple message, and that is if you're caught with marijuana, you could lose all your student loans. That's too much. That's ridiculous. So I saw truth in that side of it too, and then it really was it was a combination of the Democrats coming to power in 2006 and 2008 and acting on nothing that they were campaigning on about ending the war and bringing back civil liberties, ending the Patriot Act, things like that. And so it really was the Ron Paul moment, the May 2007 debate with the Giuliani and Ron Paul. And Ron Paul was this anti-war, pro-civil liberties, anti-drug war, fiscal, conservative Republican. And my mind was blown because I had never seen that before, especially from the Republicans. Up until that point, I just thought they were just warmongers. I thought they were pretty evil. And then here's this very sensible, tiny doctor from Texas, and he made perfect sense. So that's the keyhole moment, right? I'm like, who is this guy? My friends are like, oh, he's a libertarian. You should check him out. I'm like, libertarian? What the heck is that? And then I looked it up, and sure enough, it was all my favorite things about being a Democrat, and then some new ideas that I never really looked into before about economics. But I was hooked. So I registered Republican in 2008 to vote for Ron Paul in the primary. And then by 2010, I was running in Ohio for Congress as a Libertarian. And then, of course, I worked for Gary's campaign in 2012. Ran my own anti-John Kasich PAC in Ohio in 2014. It's called Central Ohioans Countering Kasich, COCK. We worked long and hard to give him the shaft. He blew it. A lot of puns, mainly. And then in 2016, of course, I worked with you on the Gary Johnson campaign again with the Liberty Tour. So I'm hooked. I've been at this for more than 10 years, which is kind of crazy considering you see a lot of people come and go. A lot of people burn themselves out. So you kind of got to pace yourself and know what you're able to do. And I am only good at communication and running for office.
I feel like there's this moment where a third party or maybe a fourth party is going to break through. Why haven't the libertarians gotten more traction?
Well, I think there's a lot of roadblocks and obstacles from state to state that keep us from excelling the way we should. I know in Ohio specifically, we got kicked off the ballot. They rewrote the minor party ballot access laws. I think if they didn't do that, you actually would have seen a few elected libertarians to state rep positions, because the Ohio Republican Party has a lot of Republicans in the state rep offices who run unopposed every 2 years. And they campaign on fiscal conservatism and things like that, but then they get there and they don't do those things. And then they count on the fact that the people aren't going to vote Democrat, and they don't have any other choices. So in Ohio, I know specifically it's because of the roadblocks. A lot of states have similar third-party ballot access roadblocks. But then you see in places like New Hampshire, Nebraska, California, Texas, New Mexico, Tennessee now, we actually are getting libertarians elected to local offices. And then you also have Republicans and Democrats switching parties because they're ashamed of their own political party. What's fun about 2016 is that it smashed all the narratives. Democrats don't know if they're Democrats anymore. Republicans don't know if they're Republicans anymore. So you've seen Republicans and Democrats who are already elected to state-held offices, and they're switching to the Libertarian Party. That's very exciting. I think that spells growth. I think that shows promise for the movement going forward.
So let's assume there's a lot of conservatives watching this, and they're...
Wait, you have a conservative audience?
Sometimes, but and they watch because they love the bits about beer, but they don't know much about libertarians either. They have maybe these caricatures in their mind. Convince them right now to switch to the Libertarian Party.
The Libertarian Party is everything you've wanted to vote for the last few decades. It's everything you thought you were voting for with the Republican Party. But the Republican Party is controlled by the lobbyists and the big money donors and the special interests. Libertarians are principled. We owe nothing to nobody except the people. And that's why you should always be voting Libertarian. Libertarians are the conservative cure to the cancer that is the Republican Party in America.
You've done that before.
Not that way, but you know.
Okay, well, so one of the interesting dynamics that really arose out of the Tea Party that I'm fascinated by is you have these libertarian-ish Republicans now. You have Rand Paul. I would actually put Mike Lee in that category. Certainly Justin Amash and Thomas Massey, right. And all of them, to a substantial extent, have partnered with Democrats on things like mass surveillance, stopping mass surveillance, things like criminal justice reform, drug policy reform, and even some going after crony capitalists and of course the Ron Paul issue, endless war. I think that's a sort of a measure of what a libertarian could do.
Yes.
If they could compete.
Yeah, if a libertarian were elected, you're absolutely right. You could work with Democrats and Republicans on the issues they agree on. And I agree. I actually wrote about this 5 years ago, 2013, because that was a big year. You saw Republicans like Justin Amash, Thomas Massey, working with Democrats like Tulsi Gabbard and Jared Polis, and they were working on ending domestic spying with the NSA, defunding the NSA program that spies on people. They worked together on a sensible foreign policy in regards to Syria. I'm pretty sure, I remember Obama was trying to go into Syria and he realized he had to go to the Congress, but he didn't even end up doing it because there was already such an anti-war movement within the Congress. It was led by those libertarian-leaning Republicans and those progressive-leaning Democrats. I've said for years that progressive-leaning Democrats and libertarian-leaning Republicans are the future of politics, and the reason for that is because of the Millennial Generation. The Millennials, you got the Bernie kids on the left, you got the Ron Paul kids on the right, and they want to work together, and they can work together on the big issues, right? Reducing military spending, a more sensible foreign policy, sensible economic policy. They may vary on social programs and things like that, but Bernie and Ron Paul worked together on auditing the Fed. Yeah. And protecting civil liberties. Ron Paul and Russ Feingold both voted against the Patriot Act. So there's a lot of parallels where they agree, and I think you're going to see a lot of these progressives and libertarians continue to pick up steam. I think it's a holy alliance in American politics right now, and it's only going to grow.
I just got a chance to tell Ron Paul that at a very superficial level that I saw a lot in common with Bernie Sanders.
Sure.
And the Bernie Sanders movement, the Bernie Bros, and the Ron Paul kids. And luckily he didn't kick me off of his TV program after that, but it's at a very superficial level. The rage against the machine is there. Mm-hmm. And Bernie rages against permanent war, and he rages against crony capitalism, and he rages against mass incarceration and how we lock up kids for nonviolent crimes. But the disconnect is the solution.
Right.
The narrative is all about abuse of government power.
Right.
And yet his solution is to always give government more power. I think if we can connect those dots, we get this next generation of young people that are registering as independents. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be in either tribe, but those values, like the distrust of centralized top-down right. authority, that's what to me is being a libertarian. Not all this other stuff. Like I don't want to decide how you live your personal life. I don't want to decide what church you go to. I don't want to decide who you get to marry. And frankly, I don't think the government should even have an opinion about that stuff.
Right. Yeah, and that's the general idea. I completely agree on the Ron Paul Bernie point, though, because they're both essentially old white men elected with
super charismatic, right?
Super charismatic, but
yeah.
they're truth tellers. Ron Paul is not beholden to the Republican overlords in the same way Bernie, one of the longest elected independents to Congress. He caucuses with the Democrats, but he's not beholden to them. They both spoke truth to power within their own party, and then I think that's what millennials want. I think it was Shane Smith over at Vice who said millennials can see through the bullshit. So we want politicians who are not going to give us bullshit. And that's where those guys really shined. And for the record, I'm pretty proud to be both a Ron Paul kid and a Bernie bro. 8 years apart, but I managed to swing both ways, as they say. The libertarians know how to swing.
I go speak at these youth groups like Students for Liberty, Young Americans for Liberty, and there's always a Bernie bro, and there's usually like half a dozen Bernie bros, former Bernie bros who have converted to libertarianism because they got to first base just listening to that Rage Against the Machine, mm-hmm. and then they started to fill in the blanks. Never ever a Hillary Clinton supporter. No. And I can't imagine why.
Right.
A dusty, old, tired, recycled machine politician from the Democratic Party. And I wonder if either party gets this, right? That just recycling the guy that's been standing in line the longest. They seem to keep doing it.
Right. Well, especially the Democrats, because the Clinton campaign entrenched themselves with the DNC to the point that that's how they rigged it. That's how they were able to cast Bernie aside, yeah. The Republicans didn't seem to have as much of a handle on it because Trump basically did the same thing Bernie did in that he barged in as an outsider and took over the party. It was a hostile takeover. So the Republicans almost are better in that way, in that they let this guy who had a lot of support take over. But otherwise, we would have gotten the same recycled, tired guys. You would have had Jeb Bush and John Kasich probably as the team in 2016, and I don't think there's anything worse than a Bush versus Clinton election, unless Ross Perot Jr. was going to jump in, and then it'd just be 92 2.0.
Okay, final question. Gary Johnson has just announced that he's running for Senate in New Mexico as a libertarian. The Republican, whose name I can't even remember, is sucking wind there. Mm-hmm. What happens if Gary Johnson wins? I mean, let's assume one way or the other, the Senate control is going to be tight.
Right.
Gary is potentially a broker that could be a fiscal conservative and a civil libertarian at the same time.
Yeah, he would be a swing vote. He could help the Democrats with criminal justice reform. He could help the Democrats in opposing Trump's wars, opposing Trump's spending if he wanted to. And he could work with the Republicans on, he could work with Rand Paul on a lot of things, that's for sure, and Mike Lee. But yeah, he could be a potential force for real good in the Senate. It's kind of exciting if this actually happens. And in the unlikely event I'm not governor of Ohio, I will be hitting him up for a job to work on the Hill.
But you're going to win, right?
We've got a real chance, and by real chance I mean we're on the ballot. That's all it takes.
Cheers to that. Being on the ballot.
Cheers.